The taxi was crawling through Mumbai's traffic, which felt like a total jam. "Joseph, are we ever going to make it to the airport?" Joseph was getting restless, tapping his foot in frustration. With each passing minute, his anger grew. Next to him, Rosie was shifting in her seat, clearly anxious. "Rosie, are we going to get to the airport?" Joseph checked his watch. Their flight was taking off in 3 hours. "Joseph, we have to make it." He cracked the window a bit, hoping for some fresh air, but all he got was the smell of exhaust and the sound of honking. Rosie looked at him. "Rosie, Joseph, I'm scared we're going to miss our flight," she said, holding his hand tightly. Joseph squeezed her hand and reassured her. "Joseph, don't worry, babe, we'll figure something out." He turned to the driver, whose face looked as stiff as a statue. "Joseph, isn't there a faster way to get there?" His voice was filled with desperation. The driver, who had been silent until now, turned his head slightly. There was a glimmer in his eyes. "Driver, there is another route, the old Nasik highway shortcut. But we need to leave now and turn off the GPS." "Rosie, old? The Nashik highway. But isn't it dangerous, especially at night?" The driver was quiet, his eyes glued to the road ahead, or maybe more like what was missing from the road. Still, Joseph caught a glimpse of hope in the driver's demeanor. "Joseph, what do you think?" His voice had both excitement and anxiety. Rosie was torn between her fear and the worry of missing her flight. She looked at the driver's blank face and Joseph's hopeful one. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Rosie? All right, let's do this." As the traffic started to move a bit, the driver turned the car. The GPS had been switched to the side lane, its voice now silent, just lying quietly on the dashboard. As the taxi sped down the deserted highway, the clock signaled midnight. The city's noise had faded away, replaced only by the sound of the engine and the occasional hoot of an owl. Despite her initial nervousness, Rosie had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window. But Joseph felt a strange unease. He glanced at the driver in the rearview mirror. The driver's eyes were cold and mysterious. Every time the driver would look away, but before Joseph could, he could see how intently he was watching Rosie, and he tried to push down the feeling that he was being watched. He focused on the views outside, illuminated by the dim glow of the highway streetlights. The lights flickered oddly, casting long, eerie shadows. Joseph turned on the radio, but all he got were old Hindi songs and static. Hours later, the taxi suddenly stopped. Rosie sat up abruptly, her heart racing. "Rosie, what happened? Where are we?" But there was no answer to her questions. The engine had died and the headlights were off. The car was off and the driver's seat was empty. Rosie was freaking out. "Rosie, Joseph, where are you?" But there was no answer. She was all alone, parked in the middle of a dense forest. The darkness outside was thick, and the air smelled of wet earth mixed with something metallic and strangely sweet. Rosie tried to find her phone, but the battery was dead. She was stuck, alone with nothing but silence and the creepy shadows of the woods for company. Fear gripped her, cold and intense. Where was Joseph? And who was that driver? As Rosie looked into the dark forest, it felt like someone was watching her, something old and sinister lurking in the shadows. Rosie slowly stepped out of the shade, her breaths coming faster, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. With every step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Suddenly, a cold hand landed on her shoulder, and she jolted as if her soul had been touched. A chill ran down her spine, and a scream got stuck in her throat. She couldn't make a sound. Her eyes widened in fear as she turned around to find a terrifying woman standing behind her. It was so terrifying that Rose's legs started to shake. Her white singed hair and the strange glow in her eyes were haunting. Her eyes burned like embers, and there was something that pierced straight into Rose's soul. "Mysterious woman, where are you going?" Her voice had an eerie ring to it, echoing in Rose's ears. The woman's voice whispered, loud and clear. Rose looked around, but there was no one there. She stepped back in fear, her legs trembling, struggling to stay upright. Her throat was dry, and she felt like it was like her voice had vanished. No words were coming out. Her lips were trembling, but still no sound. There was a strange hardness in her voice that made Rosie even more scared. The woman stepped closer, moving in a slow, odd way, almost like she was floating. Her shadow began to loom over Rosie. Rosie realized she was completely under the terrifying woman's spell. Just then, Yusuf and the driver came back with tea, laughing and chatting like they were reminiscing about old times. The driver was holding a thermos and 2 cups. Yusuf looked around and felt that something was off. Why was it so quiet here? He turned to Rosie, who looked scared. Worry was clear in her eyes. With trembling hands, she pointed towards a woman, her fingers shaking, but there was no one there. "Yusuf, that woman, I've seen her here before." Rosie started to panic. Her breathing got faster, and her face was drenched in sweat. Yusuf tried to comfort her, placing a hand on her shoulder, saying, "Yusuf, it's going to be okay. You're just tired. Come on, let's have some tea." "Rosie, this will help you relax," Rosie said, taking a nervous sip of tea. There was still fear in her eyes, but being with Yusuf gave her a bit of comfort. "Driver, I've never seen tea like this before," the driver commented. Yusuf noticed too. The road was deserted, with just a small hut where they bought the tea, probably a new place. They set off again, and Rosie looked out the window, her heart racing. A strange smell filled the car, and shadows of the trees danced like monsters in the fog. The car's headlights disappeared into the mist, and at each bend, it felt like something was lurking. A hidden danger was lurking ahead. You could see the worry lines on the driver's face as he sat in the seat. His eyes kept darting back to the rearview mirror like he could sense some invisible force. Every little sound made him jump. It felt like someone was watching him. His heart was racing, and his palms were sweaty. The shadows playing on the car windows looked even more eerie, as if someone was peeking in. He glanced over his shoulder, but the back seat was empty. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was right there with him. Her breathing became fast, and she again looked in the rearview mirror. There was nothing in the mirror, but even in that emptiness, there was a strange restlessness, as if some invisible power was watching her. Cold wind. Why is this cold wind passing by, touching my cheeks? It feels as if someone is whispering in my ears. I am feeling shivers. When will this journey end? Will I be able to get out of this fear? Every moment seems like a new challenge, and every breath is getting heavy. Finally, their car stopped in front of a hotel. Rosie quickly got out. Her legs were tired, but more than that, she was scared. "Rosie, I am seeing this hotel for the first time." Yusuf also looked at the building with surprise. It was an old deserted hotel. Yellow light was peeping out from the windows. "Yusuf, my heart is beating restlessly. Something doesn't feel right." Rosie Lee. Her steps were faltering. Her head was bursting. The pain was unbearable. She was lying on the floor of the bathroom of the hotel. Her condition was bad. She got up. Her heart was beating loudly. She was also having difficulty in breathing. What had happened to her? He couldn't remember anything. Everything was blurry. What was happening? How did all this happen? He looked in the mirror, his eyes. She gasped in fear. It was old and blurred, as if nobody had touched it. There were strange marks on it. Scratches were deep and scary, like claws, and some more blood, fresh blood. "Oh God, what is happening? This can't be true. This is a dream." Rosie's breath got stuck. There was fear in her eyes. Her heart started beating fast, as if it would explode. Fear entered her heart cold and fast. Her soul trembled. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. Something was very wrong. She had to leave from here now. She had to hide somewhere else. She had to leave from here now. Before anything else, Rosie stood on her feet, staggering. Her steps were faltering, as if some invisible force had held her. She was feeling dizzy. She was feeling directionless. She could only see blurry things in every direction. She looked in the mirror again. The mirror was showing a strange glow in her eyes. It was scratched and torn. Deep marks had appeared on the surface of the mirror. They were deeper now, even more dangerous, as if someone had made them intentionally. Blood was spread as if someone had made them. She tried to reach him. The drops of blood still looked fresh. This can't be what's happening. Time seemed to have twisted. Everything was changing, as if they had reached another world. One moment he was slow, sluggish, as if time had slowed down. The next moment he was moving fast, a fast current that she couldn't control. Everything had gone out of control. Her reflection in the mirror didn't seem like her own anymore. He looked like a stranger. He was changing into something else, as if another face was emerging. What's happening to me? How can all this be happening? And then she saw the forest woman standing behind Rosie in the mirror. Her eyes were staring hollow and black. Her skin was completely pale. Her eyes were drawn back in silent anger. "No, no, you can't be!" Rosie screamed. "No!" She couldn't breathe. She felt a sharp pain at the back of her neck. Claws dug into her skin. A terrifying growl echoed in the air. Rosie fell. Darkness fell. "You can't escape!" The door to the Beatles' room opened. The doors. The creaking sound of the hut created a strange uneasiness. Joseph ran inside. He suddenly stopped as if some invisible power had stopped him. She was lying on the floor. Seeing her condition, Joseph's heart sank to his neck. There were scratches on her clothes. There was blood on them. These marks were testimony of a struggle. Joseph ran towards her. His heart was filled with fear. He shouted loudly, "What had happened here, Rosie?" Pain and worry were clearly visible in his voice. "Rosie, please get up." There was shame in his voice. The battle staff came. Their faces were wrinkled with worry. They had heard the noise, the sounds of struggle. Everyone had the same question in their mind, but no one was seen coming or going in Rosie's room. This matter was even more mysterious. The police was called. Questions were asked. Everyone wanted answers, but the answers remained elusive. Every face was confused. What had happened to Rosie in that room? This question was echoing in everyone's mind. And who or what was responsible for this? Was this the work of a human being or something else? The true Chai remained immersed in darkness like the mysteries hidden within the old walls of the battle. Every corner told a new story. "Sir, we are calling for help. You just take care." There was panic in their voices. The mystery deepened, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. Everyone was immersed in thoughts. Will the true Chai ever be revealed in Mumbai city? It was Rosie's house. She lived in a lovely flat overlooking the sea. But for the past few days, strange things had started happening to her. I could see a woman. She was always watching me. From the corner of my eyes, I could see a bloody glimpse of her. Every time my heart started pounding, I tried not to pay attention. I told myself that all this was happening because of the tension, but the shadows kept getting darker. The woman was clearly visible near me. There was a deep sorrow in her eyes, a yearning. Whenever that woman came near Rosie, a shiver ran down her spine. My behavior started changing. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. That woman was sucking my blood out of me. My friends noticed. They were worried. Something was very wrong. I needed help. Rosie's health started deteriorating rapidly. Her skin turned pale and loose, as if there was no blood left in her body. Her eyes, which once sparkled, had now become hollow and black. She had become a shadow of her old self. Her worried friends took her to the best doctors in Mumbai. I took him to the doctor. He did a lot of tests, but he couldn't find anything. There must be something going on. We couldn't treat him like this. Rosie's condition had shocked everyone. She was growing thin. Her body was turning into a skeleton. Everyone was terrified. What was happening to her? The doctors had no other option. They could only give her relaxing medicines. Rosie's husband was desperate. As a last hope, he decided to consult a priest. I was hoping for a miracle. I prayed for her. Anything that could save her. The old priest listened attentively. He sat in his dimly lit room. There was the smell of incense in the air. Joseph prayed to his heart. He told about the scary shadows that were haunting Rosie. He told about her deteriorating health. The priest's face turned serious. An ancient blood-sucking spirit. A restless spirit cursed to wander. An evil force eating away Rosie's life force. This spirit is bound to something that Rosie possesses. The only way to break this curse is to give it to someone else. Joseph was terrified. He couldn't stand to see anyone else fall victim to this curse. But Rosie was dying. Time was short. He had to make a terrible decision. Joseph remembered something. Rosie had recently received a gift. A hand mirror, a gift from her driver. The priest nodded gravely. This spirit must be bound to the mirror. You must return it to the person who gave it. Joseph quickly went back to Rosie's flat. He spoke to the driver. The driver's face turned pale. He tried to refuse, but Joseph could see the guilt in his eyes. With trembling hands, the driver confessed, "I stole the mirror. I wanted to sell it, but when I realized its true nature. So I gave it to Rosie in the hope that I would be saved from this disaster." Joseph was filled with disgust. As he was listening, he noticed something strange. The driver's face was changing. He was becoming weak. His skin was turning pale and loose, as if there was no blood left in his body. The curse had taken effect. The driver's daughter, who was playing at his feet, looked up. Her innocent eyes were showing the same fear. She turned red with fear. It is said that even today this blood-sucking witch is visible to his daughter. Have you also met any such witch in your head? Tell us your story. Comment.